Welcome back, guys. So, Mr. Midnight is not here today. He's disappeared. I guess around the Christmas time. He doesn't like the jolly atmosphere. So, I'll be here in his stead. I have two scary stories for you for winter. And since it's cold and you guys are warm inside, I thought these stories would be perfect to warm up. I mean, not really warm you up, but to send a shiver down your spine while you sit in front of a fireplace. Let's begin, and always remember the darkness always follows. A born white winter. When I close my eyes, I can still see our old house sitting out on that quiet Vermont cul-de-sac. The street had only one other house, forever under construction, and the next nearest neighbor was half a mile down a dirt road, through the woods that we would wander. My younger sister, Gemma, and I came to know the woods around us as well as we knew our own home. When we stood outside, we felt well and truly alone. But no one believed the stories we told about. One Christmas break, my mum's sister and her family came over for a 3-day trip. Aunt Bob was as different from my mum as a sister could be. And we teens, well, while my sister and I were free spirits with little guidance, our cousins Jack and Ali were strictly regimented, even during winter break with the family. So when Aunt Barb had too much eggnog and knocked out in the basement, Jack and Ali were only too happy to indulge in a small act of rebellion. They dropped their books and begged us to take them exploring out in the white woods. "Come on, Gemma Brooke," Ali pleaded. "I don't want to spend my whole vacation studying. Mum will never notice, and Dad's working in the den." We didn't take much convincing. Everyone bundled up and we headed out to see our favorite winter sight, the frozen waterfall at the property line. It was just a little one, feeding them into the brook, but it was a sight you could only see in winter, the graceful movement of water, frozen in time. "That's it?" asked Jack when we finally arrived. 15 minutes of hiking in the cold just to see this? That's hardly even a waterfall." "I bet there's a bigger fall on the rock ledge over there," said Ali. Gemma and I shivered, and not from the cold. "No," said Gemma, "we don't go over there." "Well then, now's the perfect time," Ali cheered, dashing away with Jack running after her. "No, wait," I called, but they ignored me. They ran through the snow, laughing and whooping, as Gemma and I chased after them. But I'd lent Ali my snow boots. I was slipping in my sneakers with every step. By the time we could see the mouth of the cave in the rock wall, the two were breathless with excitement. "Shiz!" yelled Jack. "Take a look at that." "Get back here!" I shouted. "We don't go there," Gemma said, grabbing each by the arm. "Why?" asked Jack. "What's in there?" Gemma's eyes darted to me as I stumbled along, looking for an explanation. I pulled our cousins away from the entrance, only daring to speak when we'd retreated back to the tree line. "They call it a Wendigo," I murmured. Jack burst out laughing. "What? It's 9 feet tall with antlers? Some supernatural shiz there? Should I call Sam and Dean?" My lips trembled, and I fought a frown. "I'm not kidding, and we aren't monster hunters. That means it's actually dangerous." "Come on," said Gemma. "Let's go back to the path." Jack and Ali started to follow, but as soon as I released Jack's arm, he was running back to the cave, hooting and howling like it was some kind of game. "Jack, get the hell over here," I demanded, running after him. When he reached the mouth of the cave door, he stopped dead in his tracks. He turned around, white as polished bone, gagging as he stumbled back to the tree line. The stench of rot and blood was heavy in the air. Though Jack didn't say a word, I understood what he was feeling. As we walked away, I swore that I heard sniffing from inside the cave. That night, the family gathered around to play board games, but Jack just sat in the corner of the room, silent as snowfall, his eyes wide. There was blood where his lips should be, Brooke, Jack whispered when I sat beside him. I only nodded. The image of the born pale man with a bloody gash for a mouth flashed in my mind. The unhealed sores gaping on his legs, the jagged ribs that bruised his thin lips, the smell of decay. I shook it away. "You can forget about it," I told him. "Tomorrow's Christmas and then you'll be heading home." Jack just shook his head. "Forget? How can I forget the first time I saw a He shot up from his seat, green in the face, and darted to the bathroom. The next morning, I woke up early and went out to tend the chickens. As I made my way to the coop, though unease washed over me, the chickens were terrified, cackling over and over, shivering in the corner of the coop. "Shh, shh, shh," I cooed, reaching down to pick up Tandoori, my favorite. But a deep pain shot up my arm. With a cry, I dropped her. Tandoori had bitten my hand and ran back to the others, huddling for safety. Rudy, the rooster, puffed up his breast feathers, stuttering between me and the hens. I spread out some feed and closed their coop tight, not even bothering with the eggs. My hand was bleeding good, throbbing and red. As I stepped outside, though, I forgot about the pain entirely. The paranoia that something was wrong blared alarms in my mind. My senses were on high alert for anything out of place. That's when I noticed the footprints in the snow. Not mine. Not my family's either. Not unless they went outside barefoot. And the footsteps led straight to a broken basement window. I felt my heart drop. My blood ran cold. And then I heard a scream. I raced through the front door, my eyes darting to find anything amiss. Everything looked fine. The tree glittering with ornaments, the gifts wrapped and piled below it. But I wasn't going crazy. Gemma had sped down the stairs from her bedroom. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. "Where's Mum and Dad?" I think they're in the greenhouse," I said through a tremble. Another scream clamoured. "Brooke! Gemma!" The tone was blood-curdling, so haggard that I almost didn't recognize it as Ali. Quick footsteps pounded up the basement stairs. A desperate grasp at the doorknob rattled it, followed by a loud thud. "Please!" Ali's voice was closer this time, cracked and throaty. Gemma grabbed a fire iron and grabbed a kitchen knife as we approached the basement door. Ali, still screaming, we locked eyes, counted the three, then opened the door. There, on the other side, was Ali. Her face was dripping with blood. A red gout split her forehead. "Help me!" she screamed, gripping the handrail for her very life. "Help me!" Below her was Aunt Bob, her lips bitten and bleeding, her face crazed, her skin ashen. She gripped Ali's leg, her nails tearing into its flesh, her tongue stretched out of her jagged mouth, reaching for a taste of Ali's blood. She was stopped by Jack, who clenched his arms around Bob's waist, pulling with all his might to keep her off the stairs, desperate to help his sister. Meanwhile, Uncle Dave laid on the floor, crumpled like a doll. and bleeding. Gemma and I each took one of Ali's hands and hoisted her up the final 3 steps. Bob's nails raked down her leg. As Ali escaped a grasp, Auntie Bob fell backward onto Jack, knocking them both to the ground. She jolted wildly, her elbows swinging left and right, pounding him in the face. Blood poured from his nose. I held up a finger to him. "Wait," I mouthed, and closed the door. "Get my parents from the greenhouse," I told Ali. Then I turned to Gemma. "Get the chain." Ali hobbled out the kitchen door towards the greenhouse while Gemma and I scrambled to collect anything we could use. All the wild thrashing and screeching of my aunt shot through the house, punctuated by shouts from Jack. Gemma held out the chain and I gripped a brule torch from the kitchen. We heard frantic calls from Jack downstairs. "Hurry!" Again, we counted 3 and swung open the door, but only Uncle Dave's body laid at the bottom of the stairs. We scurried down, silent as possible, checking our corners. A putrid smell assaulted our nostrils. The smell of death and corruption. Then we heard a shout. When we rounded the corner from the stairs, we saw them, and Bob biting into Jack's arm. He wrenched away, a gash forming in his arm. Jack slammed to the floor, dragging himself to us. Finally Bob acknowledged us, her wild eyes roaming over us, estimating us with the concern of a trapped animal. I fired up the torch, and Bob flinched backward, her head spun in search of an exit. Then she fixed on the broken window. Below it lay the forsaken body of the original Wendigo, its stench filling the room. Bob rushed Gemma, pushing her to the ground, then lunged for the window. Gemma sprang up and hurled the weighted end of the chain at Aunt Bob. Catching her by the leg, Bob shrieked, hoisting herself up through the window, skidding Gemma down to the ground. "I can't hold her," Gemma yelled. I jumped to the ground beside her and grabbed onto the chain too. Even with both of us pulling with all our might, Bob still dragged us across the floor, rug burns grating our skin. But then a screech erupted, so loud and terrible that I thought my head would burst. My father from outside the window had stabbed Bob's hand with a silver-plated knife. Then my mother forced a silver pendant in Bob's mouth, holding it closed. A rush of icy air swept through the basement and out the window. Finally, Aunt Bob collapsed from exhaustion as warmth returned to her skin. The original body of the Wendigo dissolved away to ash, and we can only hope its spirit evaporated with it. Still, for good measure, we restrained Bob until an ambulance was able to come. Uncle Dave had a concussion but ultimately survived. Jack and Ali each recovered physically despite their nasty infections, albeit with scars. And Bob was held in the ICU, malnourished, dehydrated, and raging with an infection. When she recovered, she couldn't recall at all what had happened. Ali had told me though, the Wendigo, apparently having caught Jack's scent, tracked him to our basement. My guess is that it wanted a new host. The smell of decay was heavy on his old body, and Jack was young and strong. And then, well, for all her flaws, when Aunt Bob saw that monster charged towards her son, she threw herself in the way and absorbed the Wendigo spirit in Jack's place. It might be easy to blame Jack for all of this, but I really feel for him. After all, how has he ever supposed to learn that there are consequences for his actions? If he was never allowed to choose his actions, he had been so insulated, so desperate for any amount of freedom, but he couldn't even conceive of limits to his behavior. He had no idea how dangerous freedom could be, what responsibilities came along with it. But now he's learned his lesson, and it's the kind he won't soon forget. What happened to me in the winter of 2002? This event took place in the winter of 2002. I was 9 years old. Here's a little about me. When I was a kid, I was a lively child. I didn't talk all that much, but I had maybe little too much energy. I do things without thinking and often got scolded after I accidentally broke something or hurt someone. I loved winter, so I was outside playing in the snow every day. Our front yard was filled with snowmen of different sizes and a couple of snow forts. The sun had set and it was only about 4 p.m. and it was already dark outside. I was building an extension to my fort when I heard a slight giggle coming from the forest. I stared into the dark forest for a short moment till I carried on with the building. What an ugly looking pile, a voice emanating from the forest said. It gave me the chills. The voice was hoarse and guttural. I walked to our terrace and stared into the forest for quite some time again. Mother came outside and asked if everything was all right. I nodded to her and ran back to work on my fort. She returned indoors. Seriously, have you done this before? It said, being even closer now. Who is there? I replied this time. No answer. Another maybe 20 to 30 minutes went by and it spoke again. You really suck at this, huh? At this point, I felt anger and rushed towards the forest. I looked behind some trees, but I didn't see anyone. All I heard was an echoing giggle. Shut up! I shouted, and silence took over. Don't go to the forest, or you'll get lost. My mother broke the silence. I turned back and went on with my fort. I had lost all the motivation to build it now. I sat down and leaned on the wall of the fort. The wall collapsed and rage took over me. I destroyed the whole fort. Sorry for earlier, it's just that it's winter and I'm quite hungry. This time the voice came from real close, behind a snow pile. Go eat then, I huffed, and it burst into giggling again. I took a dash to look behind the pile. What? I shouted, but no one was there. Silence fell upon the yard again. I punched down a couple snowmen and returned to the ruins of my fort. I started building it again, and in the middle of building the voice was behind me. Dinner time! And immediately a cold bony hand covered my eyes as it pinned me down. I felt a sharp stab on my stomach, which made me cry in pain. My mother rushed out and screamed at first and yelled, Get off of him! Get off! Get off now! At this point, I had lost my consciousness. I woke up some days later in a health center. I couldn't remember what had happened, and my mother said I fell over an icicle which made a cut in my stomach. I had around 9 centimeter cut right below my ribs. I had no reason to question it, as not many children would. Within the next month, we had moved away from that house. Years later, I started having nightmares about that day. I told my mother about the reoccurring nightmare when I was 17 years old. Right after I brought it up, my mother looked upset. She told me to sit down first. Remember how you got that scar on your stomach? She asked. Yeah, you told me I fell over a sharp icicle. She then told me that wasn't true. She told me that because what really happened could have scarred me for life. She felt relief that I couldn't remember that day, and she wished I never had brought it up again. The sight was too shocking even for her. This is what she told me then. I see nightmares about that day too, occasionally. Mostly about what could have happened if I had not heard you scream. I ran outside and saw this skinny old human wearing nothing but leather clothing, and the stench was indescribably terrible. It was over your body with its fingers tearing into your stomach. I screamed at the sight and grabbed the first thing I could and ran towards you. I hit it with a shovel many times, but it didn't seem to budge. "Get off," I yelled, and yelled while crying. "He's a good boy. Stop hurting him." Then it turned its head at me. Its face looked so wrinkly, bony, and its white, thin hair overlapped the face. I took a final swing on the head and it scurried off four-legged. I called for help and we took you to the health center, where you stayed for over a week due to infection over the wound. I would hear it in her voice that she was not lying, but I have a hard time to believe all this. She also claimed that they found a small piece of rotten human skin inside my wound. It wasn't mine. I really don't know what to believe, as it thrives fear in my mind to even think about it. Maybe she really believes in what she remembers. Maybe my real memories of the day lay hidden in my subconsciousness, and the nightmare is just a fantasized version of them. But this day, I want to believe it was just a freak animal attack that I was lucky enough to survive. Well, guys, I thank you all for listening. I hope these stories sent a shiver down your spine and made you realize that winter is a time of joy and also scary stories. I'll see you again very soon, so until then, love the darkness as it always follows.